So we're coming back to an important topic, which is dignity. So when we gossip about someone or when we triangulate, we're doing something more serious than we think, right?
Far more serious.
Because
And can we just preface this?
Yeah, please.
Why we're doing this?
Yeah, why we're doing this. Yes.
Because we just finished our previous podcast about how we build these triangles to alleviate our anxiety. And so we alleviate our anxiety with somebody else by discarding their dignity and not caring. We introduce this third person. And hey, everybody that's listening, Christa and I were talking about this, and we were both really convicted. Like, holy cow.
Yeah.
We do this, and we said we do this, but then we realized, wow, this is serious.
We did this recently.
Right.
Well, and I'm thinking of all sorts of examples, because I think when stress increases, right?
Yes.
So when stress increases, when there's change, when there's all these things, it's so easy to justify it.
Yes.
And be like, well, this is stressful. This is too much. This is crazy. Like, this is chaos, right?
Yes.
And then it's so easy to say, well, then I get to talk about this other thing, this other party, this other situation.
Right.
And so I wanted to, because this word dignity, like, really, really struck me. What, if you could define it, like, what is it? Like, what does that mean?
Man, that's a great question. And yeah, I like, usually I can sort of respond and
that's okay.
kind of on the fly. This
that's
one
fine.
I think is, all right. So for me, it's an important thing.
Yeah.
To believe, and we talk a lot about dialectics, and like two things can be true at the same time. Like somebody can really do something inappropriate or wrong or destructive or ineffective, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And they can still have dignity, which is contrary to the message of our culture.
Agreed.
That what does our culture do? It highlights a celebrity or a politician or an influencer or someone poor person that messed up, and there's nothing redemptive about this person at all. And so dignity, I would say dignity is an inherent quality within everybody. I'd go so far as to say because everybody's made by a creator, by something greater and greater than me. And so there's this inherent dignity of just anybody or anything that's created. Yep. And that's my bias. I'll own it. Like I believe in God. So that's where I come from. I think actually on a theological, philosophical level, it's hard to find dignity apart from that. I don't want to go down that rabbit trail. That's okay. That's where I'm coming from, and that's how I look at dignity.
Well, I think that's so, yes, that's fantastic. And I actually just looked it up because I was like, I want to see what's the dictionary definition.
Did I get it right?
So it says this, you did, the state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect.
Right.
The state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect.
And you know what? We all believe this about ourselves anyway. Now, there's going to be people who are listening and they're going to say either about themselves or others, like, I know this person does not believe that. And yet I would say they have a hard time believing in their own sense of dignity and worth, and yet they don't. Yep. Because the fact that they object to the unfairness and the injustice and then the hurts that's happened to them proves that they're appealing to, hey, there's a higher standard here for me. They're saying this isn't right what happened to me. Yep. Why? Because they do actually believe that they have some inherent dignity. Yep. And so even depressed people, why are they depressed? They're depressed because they actually believe they have some inherent dignity and expectations in life don't live up to the reality that I do have this dignity.
Wow, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought of depression that way before. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times it looks like they don't think they have any self-respect at all anymore. But why do they not have any self-respect? It's because there's been a gross violation of the sense of inherent dignity that they have.
Wow. Well, and even actually, without going down a whole rabbit trail, the state of anger is almost like someone's violating my dignity. It puffs us up. Right. It makes anger is really important. It actually sends a signal to us that somebody's crossing our boundaries.
Yes.
Right. And so it's actually anger is for protecting ourselves when someone's coming at our dignity. Right?
Yeah. And so then sometimes we grow up in environments where to be angry and to stand up for this inherent sense of dignity is met with more invalidation.
Yep.
And so we learn I can't stand up for my sense of dignity. Yes. And so I have to suppress it. And what do people say about anger? Anger turned inward is depression.
Oof.
And so when our expectations aren't met, and some of that expectation that I'm hearing you say that I agree with is, I am a person of dignity.
Yes.
Notice C.S. Lewis in his book Mere Christianity, he says we do believe in an absolute right or wrong. And he gives an example of when someone cuts in front of you, you get upset.
Yeah.
And why do we get upset? Because we're appealing to this innate idea that there is an absolute right or wrong and right and wrong in the world.
Sure.
And so even on something as trivial as somebody cutting in front of me, I am upset because I'm objecting to some higher standard. And so when people violate our expectations, or if they violate us, they're violating this inherent expectation that we should have. It's an appropriate should, that I should have a sense of dignity about myself. That's okay. That's not selfish.
Sure.
That's who I am. That's inherent.
Yep. So I want to, this is so interesting. I want to bring it back to the piece about, gossip and triangulation, because we were just at the end of our last episode, and why we're continuing this conversation is we were talking about when you triangulate and you gossip or whatever the instinct is, you're not maintaining the dignity of the person that you're gossiping about or that you're triangulating about. So I could imagine someone arguing, just to play, devil's advocate, is why is it my responsibility to worry about their dignity? Because they violated mine by doing A, B, or C.
Wow, that's such a great question. Especially when we don't want to overfunction. We don't want to be codependent. We don't want to be like, I'm responsible for how you feel, Christa.
And I think that's the distinction, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Because I'm not responsible for how you feel.
True.
I'm not responsible for what you think. I'm not responsible for how you're going to react, what you might say.
Or for knowing my needs or anything like that. Yep.
So I'm not responsible for that. When we are becoming codependent or when we're over-functioning in that way, I'm being really irresponsible because I'm not responsible for those things, and I'm taking responsibility. Now, you're asking, well, what about dignity?
Yeah.
But why does that not apply with dignity? Here's why. Because I am responsible for how I treat you. I'm not responsible for how you respond to me.
Oh, okay.
I'm responsible for how I treat you.
Yes.
And if you are a person of dignity, I'm responsible to acknowledge that, to respond appropriately to that, and to validate that. So I'm responsible for how I treat you because you're a person of dignity. And that's why it's important that if I've done this, I have to make amends right away. And you and I were talking like, hey, we can justify ourselves for introducing a third party, gossiping, triangulating. And I think the big aha moment you and I just had was that we realized we can get so upset about what people do, but the bigger offense, the more egregious offense, the more vile offense is the fact that we so quickly discard somebody else's dignity. And that is far worse than probably what the person did
in the first place, right?
The fact that and maybe not across the board, but I think in general principle. And that's where kind of you and I, as we were talking, we kind of rocked back in our chairs like, wow, this is, someone once said, this is like a plank in my own eye that I need to take out actively, regularly, before I try and take the speck of sawdust out of somebody else's.
Right. So dignity. And so I think this is like the perfect, this is the missing piece. I know I've said that before, but this is the missing piece because it really begs the question where, we talk about, well, you don't triangulate and don't gossip and blah, 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 blah. But this is actually the why. right?
Ooh, yeah.
You know, because that's what it all comes back to. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it's good not to triangulate. I get it's good not to gossip, but why?
Yeah. Well, you're right, because within all of that, there's this moral kind of assumption.
Yeah.
Because we're saying these are appropriate shoulds. We've preached a lot, like don't should on one another, and it's a shouldy thing to do. And
sure.
like shoulds, we got to be really careful of, but it doesn't mean wholesale get rid of shoulds.
Yeah.
Because shoulds have a place. Shame has a place. Mm-hmm. And so shoulds are appropriate. And notice within should is a moral issue.
Yeah.
And shoulds are appropriate. If I've done something that's wrong, if I've wronged you, I should not have done that.
Sure.
So a should is appropriate. And then the subsequent shame is something that gives me the energy.
Yeah.
It's an emotion that gives me energy to make amends now.
Right.
So it's not that shame is wrong. It's just shame is really destructive when it's attached to a should, and the should is not a moral issue.
Right.
And when it's a moral issue, like if I discard your dignity, should is very appropriate.
Yep.
Shame is very helpful for me now to go and make amends.
Well, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I would argue, I would even take it a step further, because we're saying that if I'm gossiping or triangulating about so-and-so, I'm not maintaining their dignity. Mm-hmm. I would argue I'm not maintaining my dignity either.
Go further with that.
Right?
Why?
Because I'm assuming that I can't handle this situation. Right? Like,
what do you mean by that?
I'm kind of, so when I decide I'm going to go and talk to, Sally about Joey, because Joey's really making me mad.
You're right.
And I'm going to Sally about it. I am basically acting as if I don't have what it takes to handle this with Joey.
Ooh.
I'm behaving as if this is, like, I'm selling myself short.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm acting like I don't, not deserve, but almost like I can't.
Well, you're operating beneath yourself. You have more dignity
than that.
That's
what I was trying to say. Beneath yourself, right?
I like what you're saying. Yeah.
Like, kind of like taking a shortcut. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm not even stopping to think like, okay, I have inherent worth. Joey has inherent worth. I'm going to go to him as an equal and say, hey, let's talk about this. Instead, I'm acting like I'm either better than him somehow.
Yeah.
Or or he's less than me, or whatever. Right. It's like I'm ranking people in my, here's how much worth people have.
Yes.
And it's like a false sense of I'm above all this, or like I'm better than him, or he can't handle it, or I can't. Like, it's basically just it's not the truth about any of us.
So we violate so like what you're saying, we violate other people's dignity and how we react to them by bringing another person in to triangulate. Mm-hmm. As we do that, what you're saying is that I violate my own dignity while I go and do that, because that's it's beneath the inherent dignity that I have to do such a thing.
Right.
That's good.
Isn't that so? Because I was like, there's got to be more than, I think it's both and. It's like it's acting as if I'm small.
Right.
Yes. Like I'm that saying, I'll be the bigger person.
Right.
So usually when people say I'll be the bigger person, it's like, I'll be the bigger person and go to Joey directly.
Right. It's like acting childish.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you asked last podcast, like, all right, so Brett, what do you say when someone is trying to triangulate you and somebody else is trying to triangulate you, and they're both trying to get you triangulated between them?
Their conflict.
I think, like you asked, like, how do you respond to that? So what you're saying is, I could respond to you if you do that with me and say, Christa, why are you acting so beneath yourself?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, yes. You could say, I think that's another kind of missing piece too, is like saying, Christa, and I think you said this to me once.
I think so.
Are you remembering it?
I do, yes.
I was talking about a situation, and I was really, like, almost throwing my hands up about it.
Yeah.
And you were like, I'm noticing, like, when you talk about this other situation or these other times, you are so, like, here's what I'm doing, like, in my strength, in my dignity, right?
Right.
And you pointed out, for some reason, I'm not hearing the same approach. Right? And it wasn't critical. And it was
just an observation.
It was just an observation. And I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Why am I selling myself short on this? Why am I acting like I can't handle this, right? Because I've handled it over here, over here, over here.
You know, it's funny and inherent. Now I'm looking back at this, and this is to support your idea that we're acting childish and beneath the inherent dignity we have, because I remember I wasn't being judgmental.
No.
I was just sad. Like,
I didn't feel judged.
right. I was just sad for you. Like, you don't have to go here. Why are you?
Yes.
Why are you doing this? Because, like,
this isn't the truth about you.
right. Yeah. And I knew I couldn't convince you of that. Nor was I going to try, but I just felt the sadness for you. Like, oh man, why are you going there? You don't
but I
need
think
to.
that's exactly that. The point is, that's exactly because I think that could be viewed as an opportunity where you could have gotten into it with me and been like, oh yeah, you are the victim, you know? And you could have joined with me in that. And instead you're kind of like, well, now wait a minute, something's not tracking here. And so similarly, if someone's trying to triangulate us, we can sit back and be like, well, wait, I know this person is strong, assertive, you know, intelligent, whatever it is. And like, but they're acting as if they don't see themselves that way at all.
So I got a great application for us.
Oh, I love it.
To really work on this in times of non-conflict with somebody else. Okay?
Perfect. I love it.
And this is this is hard.
Okay.
Whatever news station you like to listen to. Watch how they tee people up as having nothing redemptive about them whatsoever. It doesn't matter what network you listen to.
Yes.
And so maybe watch, and then when they throw up the president or a presidential candidate or some celebrity, and they just slam this person, just notice. Yeah. Just notice that and try to think of something redemptive about that person.
Oh, I love that.
And to just do it actively as you watch the news. And because it's just riddled with opportunities to do that.
Oh, so easy.
And I just did it on the way over here today.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. Because because I am an enthusiastic driver, I'm a little conscientious that, you know, maybe I've done something to upset somebody. And somebody was beeping and I thought it was me and thank God it wasn't. And my immediate thought was, why is that person so upset with that other person? And then I kind of like, nope, sure there was a reason for that. And you know, that person has probably got a tough day or they're stressed or they're looking to get to right. Trying to find something redemptive about a person, even when there's apparently no evidence for that. Because that's what our culture pitches to us, is that there's no evidence here that this person has any redemptive quality, no dignity.
Right, right. And it's not telling the whole story, right? It's telling about behaviors someone did or situations, and that's just a snippet of
powerful.
The person, right?
Yes.
They're talking about an action that person took. Because I think about, the one that I was like late to the party on this one, but there was a woman who this video went viral. She was on a plane.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember this, but she's called the Plane Lady.
Oh, right.
And
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
she was agitated. She was upset. She was going off about something on board before the flight took off, and it went viral within, of course, hours, right?
Yes.
And now when I think of Plane Lady, it's like everybody is just like, what is her problem?
That's what she's known for.
What a freak, right?
Yeah.
That's what she's known for. She's crazy. She's this, that, and the other. And I don't know the full story of what happened. I really don't.
Yeah.
But that's what we do in our culture is we take a viral video and we're like, that's who you are.
Right.
Now, let's think about that in terms of dignity. What about this person's dignity, right?
Right.
So people are commenting and people are blah, 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 and like, whoa, crazy person and all this stuff. And it's like, if I participate in that, which is easy to do, if I participate in that, I'm basically, again, buying into...
And when we think about this behaviorally from a psychological perspective, that behavior of kind of that voyeurism that you're talking about, that we do just even scrolling through social media, I am reinforcing in my mind this behavior of looking at people that way.
Yes.
Discarding their dignity.
Yes.
It's like we need to be defenders of dignity.
Exactly. It's almost like there seems to be this universal thing where we instinctively know to preserve people's dignity in some situations, like guarding people's privacy if they're having a medical emergency or if somebody's dying in the hospital or whatever. It's like, we're not going to broadcast that. We're not going to, it's like privacy. Like, this person's dignity needs to be preserved. Right. And yet in other situations, it's just out the window. It's like, who cares? Right.
Yep.
It's just wild. It's wild. And I think we become desensitized.
It's wild it's wild in the truest sense too, because it leads to kind of this wild anarchy, chaos type of culture that we always complain about. I remember years ago, I can't remember who it was that responded, but there was an article in the newspaper, I think, highlighting, all these atrocities in the world. And it ended with an editorial question of, what is wrong with the world? And one person highlighted the article and responded and said, I am.
Wow.
I'm the problem.
Oh, my goodness.
And, I think the antidote to this problem we have, just discarding dignity, is a sense of humility and personal accountability. And saying to our spouse, and I'm going to do a shout out to men. Because I think it's hard for us as men. We feel like to be vulnerable and to be humble and to say, I've messed up, here's what I've done, is weak.
Sure.
And the weakness is the inability to do that, or not even the inability, it's the refusal to do that. And I really want to just encourage men, along with challenge myself, take the first step and have some humility and accountability and say to your spouse, you know what? I've not been a guardian of your dignity and I want to do better.
Yep.
And to do that in work environments and in home environments with our kids to parents, that's a great thing to start.
Yep.
It's not easy though.
No, it's really not. I mean, this is really helping me, actually, because throughout our talk about dignity, I've been thinking about different situations. And I know in the last episode I shared about, this friend of mine that I'm like waiting to hear from, and I feel like I'm always reaching out and everything. And this is just like completely softening me towards that person. And like, because I've kind of had this like agitation inside about it, like what's going on, and don't you care about our friendship, and blah, 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 blah. And it's just kind of like, well, whatever's going on, what about their dignity? Right? What about her dignity?
Yeah. Well,
right?
Yeah, I love what you just did.
Yeah.
Because you just did what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Humility and accountability.
Right.
Right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now I can feel myself just being like, okay, I don't have to decide if she should be reaching out or if I should be, like, I don't have to figure out what's wrong or what needs to happen. But now I'm just holding her in my mind in this like, yeah, she's worth the same as me. Yeah. And I want what's best for her, really.
Right.
And it just kind of like canceled out all my like angst about it, right?
It's amazing how that goes away.
It completely went away. And actually a couple other situations in my mind, just people I'm sort of struggling with, or like situations even at work. And it's like, as long as I remember that this person has inherent worth and dignity, just as I do, what's the problem here? What is the problem here? I can only control me. So if I can only approach this person as an equal and as having dignity.
Yeah. What's the problem here might be, just to add to that. What's the problem here that I have control over? Exactly. And it's me.
Right. Yeah. It puts it back into, because I think sometimes I'll build up situations in my head, and I'll build up conversations, and I just, it's like, it gives this feeling of tension and of like, oh, like, I don't know what to do. And I'm so frustrated with that person that they're doing this, or this. Right. And so when I hold it in terms of, all right, bringing it back to basics, we both have inherent worth. We both have, like, we're equal dignity.
Right.
Now what can I do? Myself.
Yeah. And notice, I think, within all of us, how quickly we go to defending ourselves and our position on something. And it reminds me of a couple things. People will always say, "I got a terrible temper," and I'll say, "I've never met somebody with a good one." You know, right? Because we all say, like, I don't like myself even when I get really angry. And I think for good reason, because we talked about personality types, 4 different personality types in the podcast before, and what each of them do when they're dealing with stress and conflict. And none of them were good. It's not like any personality type, like, hey, this is the way to respond because this personality type, look how good and constructive it is. No, everyone, whether we become autocratic, we become attacking, we sort of acquiesce in just passive aggressiveness, or we just avoid, it's not healthy. We don't deal with it. And there's nothing in any of those approaches to conflict that is oriented towards preserving others' dignity.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I feel like this has been and I really mean this, I feel like this has been a gigantic reframe for me. Like, you know, just kind of like, okay, I've been looking at these various situations and people from this lens of like fear and frustration. And now it's like, okay, if I flip it to dignity, it just gives it a whole different perspective for me, for myself and others. Right.
Yeah. Because I think when we do that, all of a sudden the focus of culpability or, you know, for what's wrong suddenly goes to me. And it's just very sudden and abrupt.
It is. Yep.
So it's super helpful. I am going to predict this podcast, I don't know, we're almost on, I don't know what, like our 100th?
Oh my goodness, we're coming close to 100.
This could be, I don't know. But I'm going to predict this.
Okay.
This is going to be the #1 downloaded podcast.
Okay.
That we've done. Not of all podcasts ever. I'd be okay with that. And
yes.
Because not just because it's incredibly relevant as they all are, but because I'm going to listen to this one over and over and over and over and over again because I need to hear this over and over and over again. So I'm going to keep listening to it again and again. That's why I'm predicting it's going to be the #1 downloaded.
I was going to say, no, exactly. And same for me. And I usually don't love to listen to, you know, myself on recording and hear my voice. You know, like it's that weird phenomenon. But I do need this. I think I need this reminder, especially the more stress I'm under, the more kind of that's going on and change is happening, right? Because it's like, oh my goodness, I've never felt more justified in triangulating, in gossiping, in, you know, right? Like if I'm under stress. So
well, as we depart from this, I think of there was a radio show I listened to, and I remember he said, "Hey, be patient with everyone." Because we are all struggling with something. And I think that's always stuck with me. It's a good reminder for all of us. Let's try to be patient with everybody. Everybody's struggling with something, and we all have dignity.
Yes.
And maybe as we look at people's inherent dignity, we can pivot from the objectional question of what's wrong with him to I wonder what's going on with him.
Exactly.
And taking that pivot and perspective can preserve people's dignity.
I agree.
For our sake and the sake of our culture.
Agreed.
This was fun.
This was fun. Stick around. We'll catch you on the next one, everybody.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.